I saw the legs running like frightened rabbits, and I found myself utterly hateful. I remember the dreaded SS guards in the Polish ghettos. Day after day, night after night, they slaughtered the Jews in just the same way. Tommy guns were scattered here and there, and an officer, laughing or distractedly eating, barking out the order, fire, and then the scythe went to work. A few Jews tried to break through the circle of fire, but they only rammed their heads against its insurmountable wall. They too ran like rabbits sodded with wine and sorrow, and death mowed them down. No, it was not easy to play the part of God, especially when it meant putting on the field gray uniform of the SS, but it was easier than killing a hostage. In the first operation and those that followed, I was not alone. I killed, to be sure, but I was one of the group. With John Dawson, I would be on my own. I would look into his face, and he would look into mine and see that it was all eyes. Don't torture yourself, Alicia, said Gad. He had turned off the radio and was scrutinizing me intently. This is war. I wanted to ask him whether God, the God of war, wore a uniform, but I chose to keep silent. God doesn't wear a uniform, I said to myself. God is a member of the resistance movement, a terrorist. Alana arrived a few minutes before the curfew with her two bodyguards, Gideon and Joab. She was restless and somber, more beautiful than ever. Her delicate features seemed chiseled out of the brown marble, and there was an expression of heart-rending melancholy on her face. She was wearing a gray skirt and a white blouse, and her lips were very pale. Unforgettable, that broadcast of yours, murmured Gad. The old man wrote it, said Alana, but your voice. That's the old man's creation, too, said Alana, sinking, exhausted, into a chair. And after a moment of complete silence, she added, today I saw him crying. I have an idea that he cries more often than we know. The lucky fellow, I thought to myself, at least he can cry. When a man weeps, he knows that one day he will stop. Joab gave us the latest news of Tel Aviv, of its atmosphere of anxiety and watchful waiting. People were afraid of mass reprisals, and all the newspaper had appealed to the old man to call off John Dawson's execution. The name of John Dawson, rather than that of David Ben Moshe's, was on everybody's lips. That's why the old man was crying, said Gad, brushing a stubborn lock of hair back from his forehead. The Jews are not yet free of the persecution reflex. They haven't the guts to strike back. In London, the cabinet is in session, Joab went on. In New York, the Zionists are holding a huge demonstration in the Madison Square Garden. The UN is deeply concerned. I hope David knows, said Alana. Her face had paled to a bronze hue. No doubt the hangman will tell him, said Gad. I understood the bitterness in his voice. David was a childhood friend, and they had entered the movement together. Gad had told me this only after David's arrest, for it would have been unsafe before. The less anyone knew about his comrades, the better. This is one of the basic principles of any underground organization. Gad had been present when David was wounded. In fact, he was in command of the operation. It was supposed to be what we called a soft job, but the courageous stupidity of the century had spoiled it. His was the fault if David was to be hanged on the morrow. Although wounded and in convulsions, he had continued to crawl along the ground with a bullet in his belly, even to shoot off his gun. The mischief of that a courageous, die-hard fool can do. It was night. An army truck came to a halt at the entrance of the red-capped paratroopers camp near Gadara in the south. In it were a major and 3 soldiers. We've come to get some arms, the major said to the sentry. A terrorist attack is supposed to take place this evening. Those goddamn terrorists, the sentry mumbled from under his mustache, handing back the major's identification papers. Very good, Major, he said, opening the gate. You can come in. Thanks, said the major. Where are the stores? Straight ahead, and then 2 left turns. The car drove through, followed these directions, and stopped in front of the stone building. Here we are, said the major. They got out, and a sergeant saluted the major and opened the door. The major returned his salute and handed him an order with the colonel's signature at the bottom. An order to consign to the bearer 5 Tommy guns, 20 rifles, 20 revolvers, and the necessary ammunition. We're expecting a terrorist attack, the major explained condescendingly. Goddamn terrorists, muttered the sergeant. We've got no time to lose, the major added. Can you hurry? Of course, sir, said the sergeant. I quite understand. He pointed out the arms and ammunitions to the 3 soldiers who silently and quickly loaded them onto the truck. In a few minutes, it was all done. I'll just keep this order, sir, said the sergeant as as the visitors started to go away. Right you are, Sergeant, said the major, climbing onto the truck. The sentry was just about to open the gate when his sentry box with the telephone rang. With a hasty apology, he went to answer. The major and his men waited impatiently. Sorry, sir, said the sentry as he emerged from the box. The sergeant wants to see you. He says the order you brought him is not satisfactory. The major got down from the truck. I'll clear up with him on the telephone. As the sentry turned around to re-enter the box, the major brought his fist down on the back of his neck. The sentry fell noiselessly to the ground. Gad went over to the gate, opened it, and signaled to the driver to go through. Just then, the sentry came to and started shooting. Dan put a bullet into his belly while Gad jumped into the truck and called out, "Let's go and hurry." The wounded sentry continued to shoot, and one of his bullets punctured a tire. Gad retained his self-possession and decided that the tire must be changed. David and Dan, keep us covered, he said in a quiet, assured voice. David and Dan grabbed two of their recently received Tommy guns and stood by. By now, the whole camp was alerted. Orders rang out and gunfire followed. Every second was precious. Covered by David and Dan, Gad changed the tire. But the paratroopers were drawing near. Gad knew that the important thing was to make off with the weapons. David and Dan, he said, stay where you are. We're leaving. If you can hold them back for 3 minutes longer while we get away. After that, you can make a dash for it. Try to get to Gadara where friends will give you shelter. You know where to find them. Yes, I know, said David, continuing to shoot. Go on and hurry. The arms and ammunition were saved, but David and Dan had to pay. Dan was killed and David wounded, all on account of a stubbornly courageous sentry with a bullet in his belly. He was a wonderful fellow, David, said Alana. Already she spoke of him as if he belonged to the past. I hope the hangman knows it, retorted Gad. I understood his bitterness. Indeed, I envied it. He was losing a friend, and it hurt. But when you lose a friend every day, it doesn't hurt so much. And I've lost plenty of friends in my time. Sometimes I thought of myself as a living graveyard. And that was the real reason why I followed Gad to Palestine and became a terrorist. I had no more friends to lose. They say that the hangman always wears a mask, said Joab, who had been standing silently in the front of the kitchen door. I wonder if it's true. I think it is, I said. The hangman wears a mask. You can't see anything but his eyes. Alana went over to Gad, stroked his hair, and said in a sad voice, don't torture yourself, Gad. This is war. All right, team. So